Well, it's good to be with everyone here this evening on this National Day of Prayer. Thank you so much for everyone taking time out of your schedules to join with family and friends at this memorable event. This evening, I have the distinct honor to introduce our guest speaker this evening. But before I do, I give recognition. I do this every year to Mr. Art Armendariz. Would you please stand? He is our former mayor. He's the one that began this in 2001. The National Day of Prayer has been going on for many, many years, but he decided to get it going here in Delano. So thank you so very much for doing that. But Delano has received a man we saw fit was qualified to serve as our chief of police back in July of 2018. And so this evening, he is going to be our guest speaker. And so without any further delay, I'm going to invite Delano Chief of Police, Robert Nevarez. Let's give him a warm welcome tonight.
Thank you, Pastor, for that introduction. And I want to thank all of you for giving me this distinct honor of speaking at today's National Day of Prayer. I really do consider this an honor. But before I do that, I just want to pray over what I'm going to say today. So I just ask that you join me. Father, I pray over the people of Delano, the leaders, those of influence, so that we can serve you in the most effective manner possible. I ask that we be healthy, both physically and mentally, so that we can best serve our communities. Help us to see ourselves through your eyes, not ours, and make necessary improvements for you. Help me to find the right words to show your presence, and help us all to heal so that we can be complete vessels of your love. And it's in your powerful name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. This venue also gives me the added opportunity to thank you all for warmly accepting me as your chief of police and giving me the ability to serve you over the past 3 years. I really consider this a blessing to me, as much as you all have thanked me for being here. Over this time, these last 3 years, we've leaned on one another to get through some really difficult times, whether it be senseless violence that plagues our community, taking completely innocent people from their lives, or for our generation, the unprecedented pandemic that invaded our lives and also took a great deal. Loved ones who died before it was their time, a normal education, missed proms, graduation ceremonies. For others, livelihoods, jobs, maybe even a business, normalcy. And for me, the part that really reminds me today, the ability to interact with humans naturally. Like this. This is natural. This is the way we're supposed to live. Now, I understand that this was a sacrifice that we had to temporarily endure. I'm not doubting that for a minute. But I fear that some may misinterpret this as a new normal. It's not. Unfortunately, some have retreated into social media, the internet, and for human connection, a distant virtual type. Many have abandoned the true bonds of community, of family, of church, and instead made the decision to rely solely on themselves as their source. Some have isolated. This comes at a cost. This is just from last week, a couple of reports out of KMIZ in Columbia, Montana. The pandemic has been traumatic for some people, with severe stress lingering even months after cities and states have begun to reduce restrictions. Stress can cause sleeping problems and changes in appetite, increased substance abuse, and worsen already existing physical and mental health problems. From the American Psychological Association, COVID-19's damage may be felt in the workplace long after the disease has receded. We're seeing pretty alarming numbers, said Vail Wright, Senior Director of Healthcare Innovation at the American Psychological Association, who oversees stress in America. People's bodies and minds just aren't quite the place where they were a year ago. In addition to being the National Day of Prayer, May is also National Mental Health Month. Right, Rafa? You reminded me of that. So with this in mind, I want to share a little bit about my story with you. As I stand here today, I'm a relatively healthy 56-year-old person with an optimistic outlook on life, and I have hope. But looking back 20 years ago, it was a far different picture. But in order to paint my life picture properly, I got to go back a little bit further, 32 years. And we have some young people in the audience, and I'm hoping that by sharing my story and going back a ways, maybe others may be able to relate. My story is from the perspective of a police officer, but believe me, my story has application to everybody. I don't know if you know this, but I do stress management workshops for mental health providers. And I have found that what I talk about in my story, cops don't have the market covered on this. Other occupations and walks of life have the same. I also want to add a disclaimer. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm not a physician. That may come as a surprise, but I'm not a doctor. So I'm going to describe some physical symptoms. I just want you to know right now, if you have any of these, make sure you get it checked out. Okay, don't go to your doctor afterwards, after it's gone worse, and say, hey, but the chief told me that this was stress related. It wasn't physical. I'm not a doctor. So if you have any of these symptoms, get it checked out first. And then it may be something related to my story. So in my 30 years of service, I've hired hundreds and hundreds of police officers. So why do you think most young people get into law enforcement or a life of policing? What do you think the most common response is? The pay. Yeah, it's the pay. We do it for the money. No, it's not the money. Believe me, if there's anybody that goes into it for the money, you made a big mistake. That's not the place to go. Why do you think they want to be a police officer? Service. Serve and protect. Serve, protect, service. Justice. The one commonality that I've found is they want to make a difference. That's the answer I hear a lot to this day. I did about 8 oral board interviews last week, and they say the same thing. I want to serve. And so back in 1986, I'm 21 years old. I'm the same way. I want. Uh-oh. Keep trying this one. I was hired at the Fresno Police Department at 21 years of age, and I got sponsored. And one of the first things for police officers when they get hired is to get through an academy. And when you're in the academy, you're a young person, and you really don't know what you're getting into. But one of the most important classes that an officer needs to pick up for survival is this concept of being able to take charge in incidents. And I remember the instructor that I had, he was an older guy with a gravelly voice. I think back now, he was about 40, which doesn't seem so old now. But back then, when I was 21, he seemed like an old guy that had things figured out. And I remember him saying in the academy, listen, you got to understand this. You're going to get dispatched to situations where everything's gone out of control, where all heck's broken. And he said, you're going to need to be able to go to that situation and bring it into control with your voice, with your body positioning, with your inflection of voice, just by your mere presence. And I remember thinking, I'm 21 years old, right? I've only been away from my house for about a year. I don't even know how to make my own breakfast yet, but this guy says I'm going to go to situations where it's out of control, and I'm going to step into the situation, and by my mere presence, it's going to come back into order. Anybody know what that's called? There's a term for that. If anybody's gone through the academy or knows somebody that went through the academy. It's called command presence, and it's a thing. And he explained that this was really important because if you don't get this concept and if it gets out of control quickly, you or your partner's life could be in jeopardy, or a member of the public. So, you know, he explains this, and I'm thinking, you know, old guy, you know, I guess this makes sense, but I just kind of went along with it. And he had a favorite saying. His favorite saying is, "You can't call the cops, you are the cops." That was, he used to say that every day. And I'm a kid, 21 years old, and okay. Eventually, I believed him. I thought, well, if he says that, it must be true. And it became part of my belief system. Earlier, in these classes that I've done on stress management, I've talked in front of nurses, courtroom personnel, San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution District code enforcement officers, and police officers. We don't have the market cornered on command presence.